Welcome to our second lecture, or little video, in the exploration of what it is to look at Biz Stats from a practical point of view and a business analytics point of view. In this short video, we're just going to very quickly have a little taste of some of the issues, things you need to know around Microsoft Excel. So I'll talk you through this reasonably quickly. There's lots to explore in Excel. Most of you probably already have a fair bit of background in spreadsheets, and so this will be pretty basic. But we hope just to give you a bit of an idea of some of the sorts of things that you might need to know. And there's plenty more opportunity in some of the other learning experiences in this subject and in other places for you to learn a whole stack more. So this is really just the beginning. So you can get a hold of Excel in various ways, and just let me emphasize too, if you do want to make use of Microsoft Excel, then you'll need to use some of the skills that we have, some of the things that we need in this unit. You're going to need to use some of the add-ins, and the add-ins, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to get my pen to work, that you need. There is Analysis Toolpack and Solver, and there are some instructions that you can find on how to install those. Okay, so next we're going to think a little bit about how Excel works. So think about Excel as being like a big table, and in a spreadsheet you've got columns and you've got rows, and each cell in this table is referenced by its column number, column label, and its row label. So this is cell A2, for example, here. Okay, so that's the basic idea. So for example, if I wanted to calculate the average of a bunch of wages in this column of numbers here, I would just put in a formula somewhere that says equal the average of the cells A2 to A6, which would represent the first few numbers in that column. Okay, so that's basically how a spreadsheet is structured and how it works. We can use all sorts of formulas to calculate things like averages and medians and modes, and in any stats course you'll be learning about those things, and these are basically the ways in which you'd calculate those. I'll show you an example of that in just a moment. And so a few more here, which are perhaps less well known, like count if is a very valuable function. For example, if you're interested in just picking out the males, then you might have an if statement that allows you to do that, and VLOOKUP is a more sophisticated thing which we won't get to in this particular unit. So what I'm going to do is just flick across here to actually looking at a spreadsheet and see if we can look at some of these things. This is the little snapshot that you saw there, some data on the wages of people in America, and we've got their wage, we've got how many years of education they've had, their age, their gender, their occupation, and whether they're working or not. So you can see out of this page here we've got one person who's unemployed, so obviously their wage is equal to 0 and their occupational category is blank. Okay, so that's what our data might look like in its raw form. And so for example, we saw a formula there which was an average formula, so we could just type equals average here and choose the cells we want to take the average of. We might want to take the average of the first 20 people, which is row 2 to row 21. And then I just push enter, and there it is. The average salary of those first 20 people is $32,770. Suppose I wanted to take the standard deviation, but I can't remember the formula for the standard deviation. Well, luckily there's a thing called the function wizard up here. I can use that, and I can search for standard deviation, for example. And here we are. There's a few different types of standard deviations that I need to read about. Let's just take this one here. And so I'm just going to take the standard deviation, a bunch of numbers here, and that'll do me. And that's the answer it gives me. Okay, so that's some of the simple things that we might be interested in doing inside our spreadsheet. But we could also then, well, let's take an if statement. Let's have an example of that. So for example, suppose in this column here of gender, instead of calling these people males and females, I wanted to create a variable which I'll make use of at some point in the future, which we call a dummy variable, which equals 1 if it's a male and equals 0 otherwise, then I have just an if statement that says equals if that cell there equals male, then I'm going to give it the value 1, otherwise I'm going to give it the value 0. So you see that's become a person equal to 1. Now I need to repeat that same formula here, but fortunately I don't have to type that complicated if statement in again. I just have to click on it and drag it down, and you'll see automatically it's taken, first one was to do with D2, and the next time down it's now referring to cell D3 and then D4 and so on. And you'll see there's some zeros because this person's not a male, they're a female, but this one here is a 1 because we've got a male in there. So we've actually constructed a variable which equals 0 or 1 depending upon whether the person's female or male. So there's just a few little things that we might need to be able to do in Excel, quite frequently in fact. Good idea too to get familiar with a few other basic Excel functions like copying and pasting and dragging down. I've already shown you some dragging down there, where instead of typing this formula in, I just click on that and I select that little corner, I drag down. That's very useful. There's a few other things. I might want to sort this data out so that I've got the data sorted from the people with the lowest wage to the highest wage. To find the maximum wage, I might have to deal with the fact that there's a few missing data points here. So there's a whole lot of little extra skills that you're going to need to be able to acquire to be a useful Excel user. One of the other problems that you get with that is common in reality is that you're actually dealing with a lot of data. Excel is good for small and medium-sized data problems, not for massive data problems. So, for example, if you've got millions of data points on customers in a business and every product they buy, well, then you're just going to run into trouble with Excel. But it's good for in this case here we've got quite a few people. I don't know how many, but we're into the hundreds and hundreds. Keep scrolling down, you see actually we're into the thousands. We've got 4,000 people here at least, and so on. So that's a big data set, and it's quite capable of handling that. And we could easily, for example, calculate the average of all those numbers, etc. One of the problems that you'll notice, though, as soon as I disappeared off the page here, then I can't find my headings, so I can't remember what these things actually stand for. So I might want to do something like freeze panes. So here's my data, and I ask it to freeze panes. I'm just going to freeze the top row in this case. So now when I scroll down, you'll see that the top row remains visible to me so that I can remember that this column here is the years of education and this one is age. So freeze panes is one useful skill, but there's also other things that you need to be able to do to work with it. There's freeze panes. I might want to format my cells a bit nicer, insert columns or insert rows, etc. So this is dollars of wages, and they don't look very nice the way they are. So why don't I just sort of click on the whole column? So now you'll see the whole column's like that. Then I'll click my right mouse button and I'll format those cells. And I think since they're actually, we'll give them currencies. We don't need any decimal places. Maybe I want a dollar sign, maybe I don't. I'll leave the dollar sign in there. And that looks much better. That now looks like an annual wage for a bunch of people in dollar signs. So that's just another one of many ways I can format it. You see my standard deviation over here is formatted rather uglily with 5 decimal places. Don't like that. Click the right mouse button, format the cell, make the number with just 2 decimal places. That's much nicer, and you can see like that. So you do want to spend a fair bit of time in formatting your spreadsheets, because you actually, a lot of what you're doing in data analytics is communication, and communication requires things to be clear and easy for people to access, and some of that has to do with how you format things. So the data set we've actually been looking at here is based on 5,000 people from the American Community Survey, and we've just got people who lived in New York State aged between 20 and 30 years old. It's got a bit of information there which we talked about, and we'll make use of that. That's what it looks like, as you've seen already. We'll make use of that later on. Whenever you get data like this, it's quite important that you just get it clear what you're actually looking at. So in this case, for example, we've probably got enough information to work it out, but usually there is a bit more detail given to you here, and this is quite important. For example, with things like income, Is it over the last year? Yes, it is. That's good. And so on. So we've got to make sure all those things are very clear to us. Okay, that's your little quick introduction to Microsoft Excel. I hope that was useful to you, and I hope you can get something more as you begin to explore Excel and start to look at particularly some of the data skills associated with it. Thanks a lot.